another very deep and interesting scent I'll be looking forward to review. Great stuff. For the presentation of this very fragrance, there's these carvings, some dramatic carvings in some part of this fragrance that makes it feel like, some wood texture. I think that's what they were trying to imply. And then it's just written here, Raghba, with the Arabian, writings. There's Raghba here, and then there's wood intense here. You do perfume. There's not much going on, and then you find this sticker here, with the Lattafa logo. So it's a very much decent bottling and presentation. The cover doesn't feel cheap at all. There's some weight to this cover. I love the bottling of this fragrance. It leans towards very expensive fragrances, very premium bottling. Feels rich, feels expensive. Nothing feels cheap about this fragrance in the presentation of this fragrance at all. And then the spritz, the atomizer here holds up really nicely. For the presentation, I give it 10 over 10. Amazing. It's well presented. It's the kind of fragrance I like on my desk anytime, any day. Nothing feels cheap about this very fragrance. I can buy this fragrance simply because of the bottling. It's a very minimalistic design. It looks and feels excellent. Very good. I love it. That's about the presentation. There's strong honey here. I don't know. There's really no honey in the scent profile, but I really don't know which particular note is messing with me, that it gives or leans off a honey expression. I really don't know which note in this fragrance gives off that honey expression. The wood here is not as animalic or skanky. The wood you find in Amouage Interlude is definitely here, but not as animalistic as the one in Amouage Interlude. The one here feels so muted. It feels like it's a blend of that wood and honey, mixed together. It gives it almost a different genre of scent profile, which is a good thing. There's nothing linear about this very scent profile. Quite a complex scent. It's a very bourgeois scent profile, quite demanding. It's not the kind of fragrance you use by reflex. You need to be mentally ready for this to rock it, especially if you're below 40. So I find the scent profile to be extremely deep, very compelling, super heavy. It's a love or hate situation. There is no middle ground with this situation. You're either going to just love it. Sometimes you get to love this fragrance and you don't know why you love it. Sometimes this scent profile just gets to appeal to you and you really don't know what it did to earn your trust. And you can't say same for other people, because for some, the moment they sniffed this, they just knew it wasn't for them. It feels like, no way, this can work for me. So you are just going to love either this scent profile or not love it. There is no fence, there's no middle ground, there's no trying out, you can't blind buy this. You need to sniff it to be sure that it's something you can deal with. But quite honestly, the first time I actually smelled this fragrance, I felt like, what did I do to myself? I felt like it smelled so horrible. Coming from somebody who likes to take up challenges with fragrances, I hardly would say that a fragrance doesn't smell nice. I find all fragrances quite interesting because I like to see the different expressions of different fragrances. I like to see how different fragrances hold the different elements that make different fragrances. I like to get into the mind of the fragrance house or the perfumers who sit behind the art piece, trying to know what they were trying to communicate with such texture of delivery. So that makes me mostly more open to any fragrance anytime. I'm more likely to be receptive to most fragrances. My first hand exposure on this, I found it to be, what am I smelling? What is this? It has that smoky vibe. There is that smokiness. There is that booziness. This is a no-brainer. I would rather pick this over by the Fireplace any day, anytime. The inspiration behind this fragrance came from the smell you get from a burning bush, or the smell you get from a burning wood or tree or trunk. That is the inspiration behind this very fragrance. So that's where the smokiness comes with this fragrance. It's in the DNA of this very fragrance. It's nothing strange, it's nothing wild. You're just gonna love it or not love it. If it's for you, then by all means, take a plunge. If it's not for you, then it's definitely not your business. You don't want to have yourself smell like that. It's about that in the scent category or profile of this fragrance. So if you're leaning towards, or you're trying to grow your olfactory nerves or your olfactory experience or expressions on different niche or different scent profiles. I'd rather you experiment something like this, and this may help to work out your olfactory, nerves. And it's be very complex and interesting. It's an amazing scent profile. This earns 10 from me so easily. This just smells good. And then beyond that, it smells unique. You don't smell this so frequently. You hardly smell something like this on people. It's actually a big love from my end. I love this. I love the scent profile. I'll give it 10/10. From my perspective, from my end, and how I feel about this very fragrance, the scent here is 10/10. For me, the projection on this very fragrance, I won't give it a 10. And the reason is not because the projection is not very strong or powerful. It feels quite brief. So I feel like it has a very short phase from the projection. That's the opening of the fragrance to settling of this fragrance. It's a very short, a very quick phase. I find it to be very quick to retire. Projection on this one, I feel like it's there. It's above average. It's going to project. I mean, people are going to know there is something between 15 to 20 minutes. That's 20 minutes on the high side if you are pretty much very heavy with the trigger here. That's my position on this. This is where this fragrance actually shines. Raghba Wood Intense is longevity intense. I feel like there's also something about this fragrance chemistry that has to agree with your skin or your body chemistry, because I have people say that Raghba Wood Intense doesn't get to stay as much on them, as also having opposed opinions of people who feel like they have a hard time scrubbing this off their skin. The longevity here, while it can be quite subjective, I find it to be very good. From my position, this is an amazing longevity. This stays well over 15 hours. Another thing I need to put out there quickly is fabrics matter when it comes to absorbing fragrances. If you use the right fabric on this fragrance, you're definitely going to get a beast mode out of this fragrance. This is beast mode. This is longevity on steroids. The longevity here is extremely good. Raghba Wood Intense stays longer than your relationship. This is going to outdo your current relationship. This is a very strong staying fragrance. It has very strong staying power. It takes a long time to give up on you. The longevity here is eternal. I find the longevity to be extremely impressive, very impressive. It's actually the longevity of this fragrance that inspired my purchase. This is longevity laced with cocaine. The staying power is insane. For the longevity here, I would give it 10/10, straight 10. This is 10/10. There is no room for negotiation. This is the kind of fragrance where you give a 10 rating and it still doesn't feel like 10 is enough, because this obviously will stay. This to me is a 24-hour staying powerhouse. This stays still forever. So I love it. And I mean, coupled with the fact that I'm generous with my sprays, this is a point where 10/10 in the longevity staying power of this fragrance still feel like it's not enough. But I mean, that's the threshold. The sillage on this very fragrance is another 8/10. Same thing with the projection. It's not going to be in people's businesses. You never get to overwhelm anybody with the sillage of this fragrance, but they are definitely going to feel your presence. This is going to establish your company. I give it 8/10, which for me, that's how a fragrance should really be. I mean, you don't want your fragrance to be all over people's businesses, all over people's nose. You should give people some space to probably just breathe. So this is able to achieve that very easily, and I respect it for that. This shines when there is any form of breeze, AC, or anything that triggers any form of wave around this fragrance is definitely going to find expression. This does so well. I'm tempted to give this a 9/10. I'm trying to also meet my ratings. Trust me, 8 here is an amazing take on this very fragrance. The sillage here is definitely going to deliver. Whenever I wear this fragrance, people get to acknowledge that, of course, I'm using a fragrance, although bulk of the time they don't get to compliment it. It's the kind of fragrance that doesn't hide from people. The sillage here is very decent. I find it to be very, very impressive. 8/10 here in the sillage. This is the kind of fragrance that is going to give you some serious olfactory workouts. Raghba Wood Intense is dense with character. It has a very robust character. You don't find every day. It's not cliche. It's not basic. Only very few perfumes out there can share in this character, and that was by the Fireplace, which of course it cost well over 200k, if not more than 300k. I find the character of this fragrance to be quite intense, complex, super interesting. I made clear you are either going to love this fragrance or not love it. It doesn't lean towards the younger generations. You get to smell this on someone and you just assume that this person is a very disciplined person. It has to be an elderly person, a very strict person. It gives us that strict character. This is not a jovial scent. This doesn't feel casual. It's not easy to wear. It doesn't fall in that category. Very complicated scent profile. You want to know how big men smell? Raghba Wood Intense. You just smell like a big man. You're definitely going to smell like one of your uncles you really don't like. That uncle that has a certain type of fragrance that seems to stick with your muscle memory. It's going to remind you of that uncle. It leans towards an advanced age bracket. So I find it to have a very complicated character. Highly not recommended for young people below the age of 30. I strongly don't recommend it. Someone below 20 actually even using Raghba, I find it abusive and adultery or fornication. Doesn't sit correctly, doesn't sit right. This is that kind of fragrance. You get to see some reviews in some websites and you figure out that a good amount of people cannot relate to this fragrance. When you check the age demographics, you don't blame them for feeling that way about this fragrance, because this has to be an acquired taste. From 40 and above, this is a bliss. 30 and below, it's a hard time. That's teacher when you were in school, in high school or wherever, secondary school, that used to be very mean. Back in my school, it used to be the maths teacher, flogging students for no reasons, just strict and showing up in classes with canes. You are constantly in an auto panic mode. This is going to put you in that posture. You really don't want that for yourself. Save yourself that stress if you are from 30 and below. From 40, this is for you. This is a high recommendation. You smell rich. You smell put together. You smell like you have your life together. You smell organized, very organized. I find very confusing why Lattafa would put out a fragrance like this and claim to be a unisex fragrance when it's actually a very strong masculine scent. Below 30, this is not your business. You should be focused in your career. You should be focused in trying to get yourself more happy scents. This is not a happy scent. This is a man who has gone through life in so many directions, in so many areas. He's seen a lot of battles, he's won a lot of fights, he's lost some. It encompasses a lot of complexities of the vintage man. A man you don't know if he's married or not, but just how he smells already starts to give you an impression that this is a family man. This is a family man scent. You're just going to smell like a family man. With this, you smell like you have 7 kids, 2 in university, 4 in secondary school, and 1 in crèche. You don't want to be in this quagmire. You don't want to be in this hardship. This is a tough situation for 30 and below. This is going to be a very hard time. You're going to have a very tough time coming around with this situation. My conclusion on this very fragrance is tied to the price, because the price action on this fragrance is super good. I find the price performance on this fragrance to be nostalgic. You don't get this every day. For a perfume with this belt quality, with this integrity, with this texture, it always baffles me how Lattafa is able to make such artwork or art piece with such low price. I find it baffling. It just throws me off. I don't know how they managed to do something this deep and it's also super affordable. Like, how does that work? Is that supposed to be like some form of philanthropy? Or I've seen high-end luxurious designer fragrances that don't have this level. I mean, not able to acquire this level in presentation, quality, and bottling. If I keep this fragrance alongside other of my designer fragrances, which is 10 times more expensive than this fragrance, you likely think that this is more expensive than those ones, because the presentation of this fragrance is insane. I got mine for 17k I think sent by Broski. I may leave her handle on the comment section. If this was sold for 30,000, I would still buy. If this was sold for 100,000, I would still buy. If this was sold for 200,000, I would still buy. This fragrance, for me, the only reason why this fragrance is not gaining as much momentum in the fragrance space or community is hinged on the fact that this is a Middle Eastern fragrance and people just have a resent for Arabian perfumes. I think those complex oil perfumes that first introduced the Arabian line already messed so many things up. It didn't do so well in their PR, in the fragrance community. People are still stuck in that place, when in reality, these guys are coming out with some beast performances. When you talk in terms of projection, longevity, sillage, in terms of the performance, I will overall rate this over By the Fireplace. The only reason I would rate By the Fireplace over this is because they introduced the scent profile, and that to me is worthy of respect.